Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Eden Road podcast. We're recording this on Wednesday morning, which is the night after our 2-2 draw at home against Manchester City. We're also going to talk about the FA Cup game on Saturday because as Dan will tell you shortly, I think he has a lot of things to say about that. I don't think we've covered it. Well, we didn't do an episode around it because it was the FA Cup and we had a game so quickly against City last night. But we're going to talk about it in this episode very briefly before we talk about the result last night against City. But Dan, how are you, mate?
I'm good, Mike. Yeah, it was good fun last night, but as I was telling you, I'm still going through a bit of an identity crisis as to what our grander aims are this season after the weekend.
Yeah, we'll get into this identity crisis. It's just us two today, but lots to talk about. Just before we get going, remember to drop a comment down below, subscribe to the YouTube and Spotify channels, follow us on the socials at the Eden Road on Twitter, at Eden Road Pod on Instagram. If you haven't watched my Southampton review, I appreciate that it's dated now, but on Mike Clive in 5, the link for that video will be in the description. I guess it is kind of timeless. I talk about some patterns of play that I liked and the attacking display that we saw at Southampton. So if you want to watch that, the link for that will be in the description. Tweet of the week this week, Dan. I thought we'd give ourselves a bit of self-love. Craig was at the game and did the post-match tweet, which got quite a bit of traction on Twitter. I'll just read it out. Brentford Football Club, the only club that could lose to Plymouth, then 3 days later come from 2-0 down at home to the champions, a point which was what we deserved at a minimum from being a goal down. From being a goal disallowed to conceding almost immediately after, a chance to equalise, which results in Ake's first clearance off the line. Foden then scores again, seems to love a goal against us, but we created chances the entire game, and good work from Roslev down the right to knock the ball back to Whittaker, who calmly slots home, which leads nicely onto Christian Norgaard. We're going to talk about him a lot in this episode. What a man, what a player, incredible performance from the skipper, topped off with a goal. It shows how big of a player Norgaard is for us, completely agree with that. He absolutely ran the show in midfield tonight, arguably his best performance of the season. We've spoken recently about the atmosphere at the Gtech, and tonight was one of those nights. Nights like tonight are why we as fans love this club and back it with the noise that we can generate in the stadium. Even at 2-0 down, the fans didn't let off. After a poor day on Saturday on the pitch and in the stands, that was the perfect way to bounce back. We need that support every week. We're going to talk about atmosphere in this episode a little bit later on because from what I've heard, I wasn't at the Plymouth game, but from what I've heard, it was pretty diabolical, Dan, on Saturday compared to last night, where, you know, even from watching, I think the atmosphere as soon as that Whittaker goal game went in, and sort of throughout the game, I thought because we were in it the whole time, it was much better.
Yeah, I mean, it is natural to feel more up for certain games when you're up against the likes of Haaland and Foden and De Bruyne, because we kind of had that underdog mentality and we want Brentford to beat the odds, and the idea of Brentford beating the odds and winning those games is more exciting than winning a game that many of us may turn up expecting to win. I think the team news on Saturday didn't help. I think a lot of season ticket holders and regulars at the Gtech probably stayed away for the cup games at the weekend. I was there, but it was definitely a different crowd around me. And I think that's a theme in the cup. And I think it's a theme that will continue if we get similar results. I think at the best of times when we make changes in the cup, we scrape past the opposition. So I think that culminates ultimately in a bit of a flat atmosphere. And you do fear a little bit that those who came maybe for the first time at the weekend might not necessarily want to come back after what they saw. Yeah, it was like being at a completely different place last night, which is good. I mean, I'm never going to say it's a bad thing that the atmosphere was great last night, but it does need to be like that more regularly, no matter who we're against. Every 3 points in the Premier League is 3 points. It's just that. So we've got to get up every game, and I do genuinely think it does make a difference to the players on the pitch. Christian Norgaard, I don't know if you listened to his interview after the game last night. Yeah. He genuinely called out the fans for not turning up at the weekend when they turned up last night. And then he was asked about this Saturday against Liverpool, and he was like, yeah, it's Liverpool, I'm sure we'll turn up again. But that's not the attitude we should have, and it's not the attitude the players should have either in terms of how they perform that we can't just expect them to perform against the Manchester Cities and the Liverpools and not the Plymouth, those that played against Plymouth, and even any of the other teams in the Premier League that are lower down than us. So it was good, but it needs to be a benchmark, and we need to keep that atmosphere where it is. Win, lose or draw. It's a tough league, and if we are to achieve aims this season of potentially getting into the European spots, because that seems to be our big aim this season now, if we are to go for anything the last 17 games, then we will need that, because there are plenty of other big sides to come to the Gtech, but even when the smaller ones come too, we need everyone behind the team so we can get as many points as possible.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the performance on Saturday and what the fans who maybe haven't been to Brentford a lot over the last couple of seasons, when came to their first game against Plymouth, we're going to talk about what they saw and how that might affect them coming back or whatever. We're going to talk about Liverpool as well in terms of the atmosphere that we need to get for that game. A couple of more tweets I wanted to talk about. Johan Weiss is now Brentford's all-time top scorer in the Premier League, which I think is a nice milestone for him to surpass. Obviously, goes past Ivan Toney on 36, Johan Weiss now on 37, and Brian Mbeumo on 35. We've kind of spoken about the whole narrative in terms of how Brentford might struggle without Toney, and that was the kind of media angle before the season started. So I don't really want to put too much credence on that. I thought it was just a nice milestone for Whittaker to get past. Couple of tweets from the Super Bees, tweet of the week regular. He was talking about Yano in one of them, and then he retweeted something from Talk Bees. That I thought we'll start with the Talk Bees one. I didn't hear this, but apparently Carl Walker, he's shagging your wife, being sung by the Brentford fans towards Pep Guardiola last night. Dan, did you hear any of that?
I didn't, but as you know, I'm in the North Stand. That sort of thing wouldn't come from the North Stand. It would probably come from the West Stand. So when we see Craig next, we'll ask him. Maybe he was starting it.
Yeah, I hope so, because that's fucking hilarious. Another tweet from the Super Bees, and we're going to talk about Vitaliano and Mads Roerslev in a bit more detail. But I thought it was a good tweet. Yano on the pitch makes as many mistakes as Roerslev, but one is the worst Prem player of all time. The other makes one tackle after like 5 fuck-ups and is serenaded with Vitali, as in Vitali's song. The double standards are appalling. This guy needs to sort his shit out. As hyperbolic as you can get from the Super Bees, which is very on brand, because I don't feel like he does he doesn't do anything below 100. When he's going to tweet something, he just purely speaks from the heart, which I do kind of rate, but it's always very hyperbolic. But in terms of that, Dan, I do, and we've gone heavy on Roerslev this season, but I do think he might be like we've spoken about Vitaliano, and there were so many occasions last night watching on the telly when I was just like he's gives the ball away needlessly so often, and he's great defensively, and I get it, he's a versatile player. We've had this conversation a lot of times, but I do think the fact that he's a fan favorite and the fact that his mistakes don't lead to goals sometimes, like Roerslev's do, it does kind of cover him a little bit in that situation. I feel like maybe by virtue of the fact that Roerslev's a defender, so his mistakes are made a lot more glaring by the fact that they can lead to goals, kind of covers Vitali's back. But do you understand what he's saying? I do.
I do, yeah. I think if you compare the two players, and what they're both good for is they're both always available.
Yeah.
And they're two of our most reliable players in terms of that. I also think they are two of not our best players, technically. And I would even include Yanelt in that. I don't think he's in our top 5 or 6 players in terms of technical quality or importance to the team. But he is popular because of the journey he's had with us. I mean, from the moment he signed for Brentford, Norgaard got an unexpected injury and he was thrown straight in. And he's always been a bit of a hero in that aspect. He's always been there for us from the start. Obviously, he was signed for very little as well. So he's very much rated in terms of that. With Roerslev, I think people like to criticize somebody and they like to find somebody to always criticize. And then I think it makes it more difficult for them to praise him when he is due some praise, because I think as much as we have gone for him this season, I also think in the last 3 or 4 weeks, as his performances have improved, we've also acknowledged that. And again, here I thought he actually played quite well. Obviously, there was the slight mistake, not being quite strong enough, not really knowing where Savinho was, whatever we want to call it for one of the goals. But apart from that, I thought he dealt with him very well one-on-one, especially in the first half. He got up and down on that right-hand side. He had another effort on goal. So it's a couple games in a row now in the league where he's perhaps a bit unlucky not to get himself on the score sheet. So he is doing the right things. I think the confidence coming back to him a bit more. He's a bit more forward thinking again now. And his performances have improved. And he's always available for us, just like Vitali. So I think he does need a bit more credit, or I think more than anything, I think he just needs to stop being the scapegoat all the time, no matter how well he plays. I think fair enough if he gets criticised if he does have a real bad game, but I think we've got to look at it from the outside. He is capable of playing well, and give him credit when it is due.
Yeah, I think we have, like, we've criticised him a lot, but we have given him his credit for the kind of turnaround in performances in the last few weeks. And there were some people saying or criticizing us for being disingenuous for giving him praise after criticizing him, as if like once we've given him stick, he is now shit forever and we can't say anything good about him for the rest of his time at Brentford. It's like, no, it's not really how it works. Like, if you criticize someone, it's what we do on the podcast. It's what football fans do. It's a game of opinions. If we criticize someone and they manage to turn around in form, it's not like we have to die on that hill that he's terrible. Do you know what I mean?
No, and I'm sure Maz Rostev knows when he has a bad game too. Yeah. I don't think Maz Rostev comes home after having a nightmare and thinks that he did a good job that day. I think he knows that, his performances at times earlier in the season were below par. But I think he also is aware now that he is playing better and he is getting the credit that he deserves for that. I mean, we would never, that it is completely pointless being completely against the Brentford player, but we can be analytical and we can be logical based on their performances on the pitch, and we can give them constructive criticism. But ultimately, we support all those players until the day they leave the club. And if Thomas Frank thinks they're good enough to play, which he does with Rostev, we know that he's someone that Thomas Frank trusts. He likes him in the team. He recognises as well he's always available when perhaps others aren't. So, we've got to get behind him, and he obviously sees something in him. I think Thomas Frank's probably known him for a long time, given their background with the Danish setup as well. So we've got to back that. And we have seen in the past, I mean, he's also a man that's got an assist for us in a Wembley final, which I don't think is spoken about at all, really. But when he leaves, that's probably the best memory I have of him, because, it was, I think it was the second goal, but, that was the goal that ultimately gave us that comfort blanket for the rest of the game. And it was a great bit of play to just wait, be a bit calm, and see Emiliano on the edge of the box there. So he's got it in him, and I just don't think we recognise that from him sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. Right, let's move on to the next segment of the podcast, and I haven't even written any bullet points or anything like that for this. I've just titled it Dan FA Cup Rant. We've spoken about Plymouth a little bit. 7 changes, I think there was, to the lineup, and I'll admit, right, and I said this to you before we started recording, I saw that lineup, and I said it in a TikTok as well. I saw that lineup and thought there is enough quality in that 11 to beat Plymouth today. You, on the other hand, you said before, I think before kickoff or when you saw the lineup, you said you're getting bored of it. It's going to be difficult, and you were proved right, Dan. So I'm just going to let you take away on this one, and I'll come in if I need to. But yeah, Plymouth, Dan, what's going on? Identity crisis.
Yeah, there was so much I can say. I mean, I could literally go on for hours probably on this, and I was debating with a few fans on Twitter at the weekend as well. I get people have different perspectives on what should be our priority, whether players need that much rest and when they should be rested. My main issue when I saw the lineup is the fact that Norgaard and Janelt weren't even there, not even on the bench, not even one of them. I think not having at least one of them to do like that number 6 role is a bit naive. I know we were probably expecting, and I guess it did happen, a game that we had nearly all of the ball and Plymouth didn't create an awful lot. I think they had 2 or 3 chances, but probably 2 or 3 of the best chances in the whole game. And I just felt there was no structure in the team. And even those that did start, like Kevin Schade, he was as a number 9. I personally prefer him on the left. I don't think he's as effective up front. Yarmoliuk, we saw him drifting out to the right. Again, we all know that's just not his position at all. Then you've got the likes of Carvalho, Damsgaard, and Jensen all in the side, and I felt they all kind of wanted to occupy the same areas at times. I think Carvalho in particular, you can see the confidence is drained out of him a little bit, unfortunately. I thought Yarmoliuk and Maghoma together could have done with the type of leadership that someone like Norgaard or Janelt would offer next to them, guiding them through the game. I felt Maghoma in the second half, especially, really faded before he got substituted. It was great to see Rico Henry back. Big positive from that, and hopefully we'll talk about him later in this podcast. I don't have a problem if we were to make 1 or 2 changes, but the 6 or 7 changes that we made, I would say Damsgaard aside, we rested probably our 6 most important players in Collins, Norgaard, and Bumo, Wissa. You could argue Janelt. You could argue KLP as well this season, given that obviously Rico Henry would normally be our first choice left back, but given his situation, obviously he does need some time to be able to come back. So I think we left out all our most important players. And I think if you do that in any game, no matter who you're playing, you are taking a big risk. And I think it is naive to assume that we will just go in and win. I think we've got enough evidence from even just this season, the Sheffield Wednesday game, which we scraped past on penalties. And that is just it. If we, at the very best case scenario in these games, when we tend to make 6 or 7 changes and we take out the core of the team, not just 6 or 7 other starters, I would say the key players. And then with the rest of the side, we move around the positions and we shoehorn them in a little bit, too much for my liking, just to fit everyone in kind of a structure. At the very best, I think we will narrowly win. We will get a 1-0, perhaps. And I also think it's very naive to shove Brian and Boomer and Johan Wissa on with half an hour left and expect them to solve our problems when behind them there is no structure. And I felt particularly when they came on, Wissa was kind of playing behind Schade as like a number 10, and I didn't really like that. And then the 2 in front of the back 4 at that point was Damsgaard and Jensen. And it just felt like there was no structure. It just felt like there was just a load of attacking players in and around the same areas. And even Brian, you could see, was really struggling when he came on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we got what we deserved ultimately. I think we were the only Premier League team to go out to a lower league opposition in the 3rd round. I looked at the teams that even the likes of Wolves, so Wolves, Leicester, and Southampton,
Tottenham.
all
Tottenham.
Yeah, and Tottenham, but those 3 all played against Championship opposition. So similar standard to Plymouth, you could say. They all won quite convincingly. That's why I didn't include Tottenham. See, they didn't win convincingly enough. And if you look at the lineups they put out, Jamie Vardy started for Leicester. Wolves, I think Cunha was still serving his ban, but apart from that, I think it was a strong team. The Southampton side was very, very similar to what we faced last week. And if they can put out a full team, recognizing, for whatever reason, confidence, or they just want to progress in the cup, that it should be a priority to them, given that they're in a relegation battle, I just can't work out why we don't want to prioritize this. I understand that players get tired, or maybe Norgaard, the likes of Norgaard and Janelt, can't play 90 minutes every week, but I would have happily played one of the 2 against Plymouth and then rested Janelt, for example, last night against City, if it meant that, we went in with a stronger squad at the weekend. I just don't get it with the position we're in the league, because I think at best we're looking at an outside shot of the Conference League through the league, and I think that is a long shot. I think it's safe to say it's a long shot.
It's a gamble. It's a gamble.
Yeah.
to kind of to devalue the Carabao Cup in the way that we did against Newcastle with the changes that we made, to devalue the FA Cup with the changes that we made, and then to put all of, like, in terms of, and it's a wider conversation, right, about being in the Premier League for 4 seasons now and what we become and how fans' expectations rise as the seasons go on. To only be now having one objective, which is to finish in Europe, and it's the most difficult. I mean, obviously, it's very difficult to win a Carabao Cup or to win an FA Cup, but to narrow your options to just one competition for the season. And I know, sort of, to define, I was about to say, for the season to be a success, I think the success is Brentford being in the Premier League, and I don't think you can get away from that for another sort of, I don't know, another 4 or 5 years, in terms of that being the benchmark for success, in terms of Brentford staying in the Premier League and being, if we're in the Premier League for 10 years and we've really and truly consolidated that status, I do think that is success. But what the fans want are memories, the memories that you get from an FA Cup run, or the memories that you get from potentially getting to Wembley in a semi-final.
We have a brilliant team at the moment. We have a brilliant team, a brilliant manager. This might not always be the case. We are the best we have ever been placed right now at going for one of these cups, because we are good enough to beat anybody on our day. And if you draw a top side, that's even if you draw a top side. And I see Plymouth did get Liverpool at home in the next round, so we would likely have played them in the next round. There is no guarantee that we'd go out there, because Liverpool have other priorities, probably, in terms of winning the league, the Champions League as well. I think we'd fancy ourselves at home if we put a really strong side out, our best side, in a one-off game. Why not? And, you know, Arsenal are out because Man United beat them on penalties. One of them was always going to go out this weekend. It only takes a few nice draws to go really, really far in the cup competitions. If we look at when the next round is, Brentford now don't have a game for 2 weeks, because there is actually no real fixture congestion around the 4th round weekend. It is just so frustrating. And I don't see why we didn't just start with a strong team against Plymouth, and then there's every chance we go 2 or 3-0 up, and then you start taking them off.
Yeah.
And if we're not 2 or 3-0 up, then it's still justified starting a strong team, because then clearly it's a very, very tough game.
Yeah, 100%. I think and just the last thing on this before we move on to City, can you imagine, like, the atmosphere if we'd have played a strong team against Newcastle? And I understand that they were it's taken the beating that we put on Newcastle for them to, like, click into gear this season, and they've gone on this incredible run and they're doing really well. I'm not saying that if we'd have fielded our strongest 11 against Newcastle that we would have got through to the semi-final of the Carabao Cup. But can you imagine if we'd have drawn Arsenal and we played them away in the first leg and we got a semi-decent result? We were 1-0 down, or we were 1-1, or we were, a result that I think we're perfectly capable of getting. And we've gone to Arsenal and we've only won, and we've only lost marginally since we've been in the Prem. Can you imagine the atmosphere at the Gtech for that second leg if we'd have come back for a semi-final of a cup competition and only been a goal down or been drawing? Like, genuinely, I think we would have had a good chance of getting to a final. And it's just, it is really frustrating. It's so frustrating. Right, I think 20 minutes in now, Dan, and we've not talked about the game last night. So I think we should move on to Manchester City. Lineup: Vitali in for Sharda. I think that was the right decision, personally, given City's struggles in midfield in recent weeks. What did you think of it?
Yeah, and he had a nice rest at the weekend, I suppose. Yes, it doesn't surprise me that we went with an extra midfielder here. I guess the headline was that we didn't go with a back 5, which often we do against these bigger sides. I think largely that's probably due to how City have played recently. And I listened to your preview of the City fan, and he made it sound like we were playing Plymouth again, actually. But yeah, it was a good decision, I think, to bring Yanel in. I think Sharda, the concern is he can go missing in these types of games, and you can't afford to carry anybody against one of the biggest teams in the league. The only thing that does do is it can make it difficult to get the ball forward at times because we have to play out through the back rather than having any kind of outlet forwards. But yeah, I don't have any issues with that team sheet. I think having Jensen in the middle as well, it just packs the midfield, allows us to try and get on the ball as well, which we did. And Damsgaard floating around, Wissa and Brumo, anything can happen when you've got that.
Yeah, I think we saw that in the first half as well. I don't know how it went, we went into halftime at 0-0. I think the first half was a game of two halves. I think we started really well, and then City kind of got on top towards the end of it. We'll move on to the second half pretty quickly because I'm conscious that we've been chatting away for 25 minutes now. But I think City definitely were on top at the start of the second half. The game started to get stretched. Like I don't think I've seen an end-to-end game like that at the Gtech ever, really. I think first half into the second half, there were so many big gaps in midfield. The transitions were so fast. And obviously, City get the two chances. Savinho hits the post. Craig won't be happy with that because he was allowed to run 40 yards. And I know that he's got a big bugbear about that this season. But he literally picked up the ball at halfway and just drove all the way into our penalty area and hits the post. Then Haaland has a strong chance with a header. I think either side of Flecken, and that's goal bound because I think he got enough power on it. I've got here, considering how poor City have been recently, is it worrying how on top they were at the start of the second half? But I think, is it worrying, or is it sort of a case of City's attack? And I mentioned it on the City preview that I did on that guy's podcast, David's podcast, Blue Moon. That you can't sort of just write off their attacking players because Phil Foden, Erling Haaland, Kevin De Bruyne, who I thought was really, really, really good last night, Savinho, Bernardo Silva. The quality's always been there in forward positions. It's just defensively where they've been a bit of a mess. But what were your thoughts when the Haaland chance fell to Flecken's hands?
I was relieved. I think we're a bit lucky to not be behind, maybe even before then. I think clearly with the likes of Haaland, De Bruyne and Foden, the individual quality they've got, they're always going to be a danger. That is why they scored 4 against West Ham, despite not playing very well, because they do have that individual quality. And the likes of Haaland can just score a goal, and De Bruyne can put it on a plate for him or a plate for Foden, like he did for the goal. So it's always going to be a good result, I think, if we get anything against City. I actually felt like the longer the game went on, the more they looked like City. I thought maybe at the beginning they looked a bit nervy and they were giving the ball away a little bit. I thought they kept the ball better and better and better until they went 2-0 up. Then you could see their fragilities again, and you could see that they were a bit worried again about Brentford getting back into the game. So they're not quite right. We can't say that this was them at their best, but they're still a very, very good team, and those individuals are not going to change, especially the likes of Foden and Haaland at their age as well. So, that they'll probably get stronger again in the next few weeks because I can see that they're quite busy in January as well.
Yeah, they've already. Well, I think they're Marmouche and that is Becky
Kustanov or something.
But yeah, Kevin De Bruyne's pass for Foden's goal was, I've watched it back a couple of times now. Wow, that was the way that he gets a hold of that ball and he's kind of leaning back and he just puts it on an absolute plate for Foden, who's kind of drifted in behind KLP. Am I being harsh in saying that Wissa's chance straight after, is it harsh to say he has to score, or is it a really good block from Ake? I think he has to lift it, personally.
Well, I mean, when there's no keeper there and it's just Wissa and a defender, you're always going to expect him to score. But I think equally, we could say the same about some of City's chances. Haaland's header, Savinho's that hit the post. I thought they had quite big chances, and I thought the way we were playing against them is clearly very, very different to how we've faced them before. We were going much more toe-to-toe. We were allowing them chances. We allowed their big players to get in space. Whereas in the past, we've really emphasized closing the likes of De Bruyne down and, stopping the supply into Haaland. And this time we felt confident enough to go toe to toe with them. And almost both teams struggled with the same thing in terms of the quick counter on the transition. I thought Keane Lewis-Potter and Maz Rossef were caught very high a lot of the time when City came forward, and it made for a very, very good game, but it could have, and I thought it did, result in a defeat at one point in the game when, City did start to take control and they got their goals. Then I did not think we'd get back into the game. Well, obviously we did. I think Wissa's chance was massive because it was only 1-0 at the time.
Yeah.
Thomas Frank, did you see the video of him on the floor
Yeah.
as as Wissa missed? Yeah, I think he should be scoring that. And if we're to be a bit harsh on him, in the last couple of games now, he's missed a fair few chances. If we go back to Southampton game as well.
Yeah, I mean, he could have had 4 against Southampton. He could have had 2. He could have had 3 last night because there was another one that Gvardiol made a last-ditch challenge to block when it was like a 3v3 with Mbeumo, Damsgaard, and Wissa all going through. We'll talk about the second goal because it's a mistake from Mads, and I felt really bad for him because again we spoke about it at the top of the show in terms of his kind of purple patch in form and his turnaround. But I think the game was quite stretched at that point by virtue of the fact that we were just chasing it and the gaps were really starting to open up. And I think that's what you mean in terms of City should have been home and dry by that point. But it's not to say that we weren't out of the game because we were still creating chances as well. But I did feel really bad for him, and it's good that he gets that redemption straight away because if he didn't and we lost 2-0, the overwhelming opinion on Twitter would have been Mads has cost us another game. But I just, in terms of that first goal, I want to mention this Damsgaard, that ball up to the back stick, because I swear he's done a similar cross before when he's picked someone out of the back stick, and it's kind of, I want to say it's becoming a trademark of his. And he wasn't quiet last night, Damsgaard, but maybe not at the levels that he's been over the last 6 or 7 weeks. But he was still, there was the chance for Wissa that we just spoken about came from Damsgaard's ball through the middle of the pitch, which I thought was excellent. But he had a hand in Wissa's goal that gets us back into the game. And I do think, given the collapses that City have been involved in, given their fragilities at the back, once Wissa got that goal, I don't know about you, but I did think we were going to get the equaliser.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to say now, I guess, isn't it? But
No.
yeah.
No. I texted a mate. I texted a mate and said the City collapse is coming. Don't worry, we're going to get back into this.
I'll verify it. Yeah, I mean, City had the better chances, I thought, before. Certainly before the Wissa chance at 1-0. And with Roslev, I thought he was a little bit unaware of where Savinho was. I thought he was trying to lean on him maybe, but I think he just got a little bit caught there. Savinho's a bit too quick for him, and he made the wrong decision. Then I think he kind of went down asking for a free kick, but it was never going to be given. But yeah, I think we can forgive him. That happens to anybody. And yeah, I agree. It was a great assist. Damsgaard loves a pre-assist. If you included those in his assist numbers as well, then he'd be right up there. Yeah, he's always involved in anything good that we do. I think that assist from Roslev as well, it can't be underestimated. I think not everyone would have the awareness to pick him out so well in that position. It's not like he had time to settle on the ball and pick his cross. It was a first time ball back over to Wissa. It took a bit of time to sort his feet out, but he did get it in. He did get it in. This time
Ake kind of stopped in that moment, and I don't know why he stopped. I've watched it back. He kind of just has his hands up in the air, and I think if he actually challenges for the ball, he could probably get a block in to block it. But
yeah, I felt like I was there for about 10 minutes just waiting for Wissa to put it in. But yeah, I know what you mean. I thought City did have a period after that goal where they actually kept the ball quite well, and in our final third for a good few minutes. But the moment we did manage to get forward again, I think they dropped more than they would normally drop. I think they almost went into a bit of a low block themselves in the last couple of minutes as we had the ball. And that is quite un-City-like. I guess what they're trying to do at the moment is just get these results however they can. In terms of Norgaard's goal, I thought maybe Ortega could have done better. And maybe that's what Guardiola was telling Ortega at the end when he was shaking him and doing his little performance that he likes to do sometimes after the game. But yeah, I thought overall it was deserved. I thought to go toe to toe with them, it shows our quality, and it's another, you can say, turning point in our development as a Premier League club, because although they're not as good as they can be, I still think they're a good team. I still think they'll probably get into the Champions League, and we still showed quality to go toe to toe with them. And I don't think every Premier League team could put in that type of performance that we did today and still get a result. I think there are teams that just wouldn't be able to do that because they're not at the level to be able to do that against City yet.
Let's talk about Norgaard's header, because you mentioned that Ortega could have done better. I actually think it's a bullet header, and I think if he does make the save, it's a fucking incredible save, as opposed to because he gets so much. The ball from KLP is like a in swinger, so he kind of takes the pace off the cross that comes in, and I think if you get it on target a little bit a little bit just out of the reach of Ortega, I think it would have been an amazing save if he managed to pull it off. But just on Norgaard in general, let's give him some love, because I thought he was so good last night. And Craig put it in the tweet post match that it was arguably his best performance of the season. But like, oh god, the Norgaard doubters sort of throughout the season, like I see, like when we've lost away from home, and people will be questioning if his legs have gone. And I understand, right? He's very brittle as a player, as sort of our whole fucking squad has been this year. Like Chris Ayer, by the way, injured again. That man is genuinely made of glass. I don't think he's had a sustained period in the team since we really signed him, over like sort of 10 games. And I understand that Norgaard's similar in that way. But I just think he's so vital, so vital. Like our most important player. Probably not like someone Damsgaard, who I've said has been our player of the season so far, but in terms of that leader on the pitch and the person that makes everyone around them look better, I do think Norgaard is that man. And the drop off that we see when he's not involved in the squad or in the first 11, I think is massive. And I think you really, really saw that last night. So what did you make of him, Dan?
Yeah, we need to sort his contract out, because I think it's technically up in the summer, but I think we do have an option to extend it. Yeah, I thought he was really, really good. Like you said, he makes everyone else better. I think he is better as a number 6 even than Yanelt. I think even when Yanelt fills in for him, you can tell the difference sometimes. He has that calming influence on the team. I think we look much more structured with him in the side, and he does pop up with a goal every now and then. That's not the first time he scored for us, and often they are quite important goals that he scores. And he deserves it. He deserves the limelight sometimes, because, as you say, but sometimes players like him, and typically players in his position for most teams, they tend to be the unsung heroes. So the fact that he's getting recognition is a really positive thing. And Thomas Frank says it as well, that we're simply a better team with him in the side. So yeah, we need to get his contract situation sorted out. I'm surprised that we haven't triggered any kind of option already.
Well, I think given his age, is he 30 now? I want to say Christian Norgaard.
Yeah,
given his age,
another year
given
or
his
two,
injury,
surely.
I think maybe the club might be reluctant to give him a long-term contract, which is what I suspect he wants. Given he's 30 years old, given his age and his injury record, I would suspect that maybe that's where the reluctance comes from in terms of giving him a long-term deal. But in terms, like, I don't think he's getting any worse. Like, I know that there's been a couple of occasions this season where he's looked off the pace, but like I've said so many times, it's never for a sustained period. He might have one off game when he doesn't look himself, but it's not been like he's gone on a game of 5 or 6. He's gone on a run of 5 or 6 games where he's looked off the pace. So I don't think we're anywhere near his legs being gone. So I would definitely say, in terms of maybe a 1 or 2 year extension, he 100% deserves it. And I do just think we're a completely different team with him in the first 11. He like you said, he's so calm on the ball, makes everyone better around him, and pops up with your goal and very important goals at points. So Christian Norgaard, I absolutely love you. Skipper deserved the goal last night. Proper captain's performance, I thought. Before we round off City, Dan, that Brian chance at the end, oh my fucking god. I really thought that the net was going to ripple when he picked up and turned. I actually think it was going off target. It looked like Ake was kind of around.
I'm not convinced watching the highlights, and I keep watching it. I'm not convinced that was going in anyway.
Yeah,
but yeah, massive chance, and that would have been one of the all-time memorable Premier League games at the Gtech if that had gone in, because just the fact, I think Brentford tweeted that it was the latest that we've come back from 2 goals behind in the Premier League. Obviously the 82nd minute and then the 92nd minute, I think it was. Yeah, if that had gone in, and you could see how annoyed Brian was even when the final whistle went. He was almost screaming at himself because he expects to score those. And yeah, I mean, logically, you can say City also missed chances during the game, and we'll also feel that maybe they should have got 1 or 2 more and they should have won the game. But just in terms of timing, we knew that if that had gone in, that would probably be it, and we would have won it, and it would have been brilliant. But yeah, we can't be too harsh on ourselves. Both teams missed chances. Both teams could have won it. A draw was probably fair in the end. But yeah, it's a shame when it happens so late on. And again, everything seemed to stop for about 5 minutes as he was trying to pick where he was gonna try and hit it. I mean, what you got to say about City is that they did get players back and they did get players on the line even when Ortega was beaten, because that wasn't the only time in the game where the likes of Ake and Akanji were back there making it difficult for us to score.
Yeah, I think concluding thoughts, Dan. Do you want to touch on your identity crisis that you mentioned before we started recording? Because I asked you how you were as soon as we jumped on the call, and you had a mixed response. You didn't really know where the result puts you. But yeah, concluding thoughts.
As an individual game, it was great. We played really well. It was fun to watch. It's nice to be able to watch Premier League football at this stage in the season and not be looking over our shoulder like we were last season. It's nice. Obviously, we've got Liverpool coming up at the weekend. Should be another great game. Hopefully, we can compete, and I think we can. I think we can give them a difficult game. That's all well and good, but I'm just thinking of where we're going to end up. I do think it will be very, very difficult to get top 7 or top 8 this season. Based on where we are now, we're already, 4 or 5 points off it. I just think it will be very, very difficult. It's not impossible, but I can see our season perhaps dwindling out, especially if maybe we lose on Saturday, which I don't think is beyond possibility. I can see us sitting here with about 10 games left in a few weeks' time, and almost accepting that we don't have too much to play for apart from the odd place here and there in the Premier League. So my thoughts still are, would I have traded that for a victory at the weekend to see us through in the cup? I think so. I think I would have. Even if Brian had scored at the end, maybe I would have. Just purely because of where that would leave us in terms of our aims this season. But you can't take anything away from the performance last night. It was great to watch. I'm still enjoying it. Like you said, success is being in the Premier League, and I'm not saying that it's a bad season or anything. I just would like to see us just try and go for something really special. And I think it's unlikely, even if we were to win the FA Cup. I don't think that's an easy thing to do. Clearly not. But I would have liked to see us have a go. That's all.
I think the thing that makes me, we talked about it being a gamble now, and the only competition that we have left is the Premier League. So we've only got one thing to play for, and that's to finish in one of these European spots. The only thing that gives me hope is that we've got players that are going to come back. Thiago, I think, is a few weeks away. Chris Ayer, Pinnock. But I mean, to be fair, I've been quite liking the partnership of Collins and Vandenberg. But the other thing as well is that the fixtures were very, very difficult in the first half of the season. We've now got basically all of the top 6 to play at home, and we're going away to some of the lesser teams. So it was important for us to get that result against Southampton in terms of the away games that we've got coming up against the likes of Leicester and these teams that are kind of in the bottom half of the table. So I guess you could say that, I mean, if if we come to the end of the season and we do finish in the European places and we get the results that we need to get against the lesser clubs in the division, and we maybe get a few points here and there against some of the top six at home, what we're saying? Are we saying it's a masterstroke to kind of be out of both competitions and focus solely on the league? Because what I think, I don't know how I'm afraid. Well, what's if we got into Europe, would it be justified? That's what I'm trying to ask.
There is an element of vindication there, yeah, but I think it is too big a risk, and
it's a big risk.
I
think
get you. It's very much a long shot. It's not like we're in those places already and we're trying to maintain them. We're very much the chasing team. For me, this season, we've still not got enough results against the teams who are probably better than us. I'd say apart from last night and Newcastle, I'd say we haven't done enough against those teams. We've tended to beat the teams that we should be beating, but not sides above us. And if we are going to really be serious about getting into Europe, we do need to get much more points against those better teams. I just think there's almost as much chance of us going really far into the FA Cup, perhaps getting to a semi-final at Wembley, as there is of us getting into Europe through the league this season. So I don't know why you choose to prioritize that over the FA Cup when I don't think there's much more of an increased probability of us being able to break into those spaces this season.
Let us know in the comments. This is a really good debate and something that you've been debating with Brentford fans on Twitter. Let us know in the comments your thoughts on the lineup against Plymouth, sort of what competitions we're going to be prioritising going forward in terms of if Thomas Frank's at the club next season, what would we like to see? Would we like to see a cup run, be that Carabao or FA Cup? Let us know in the comments, because it's a really interesting debate. And I think one that a lot of clubs have, but, we were the only Premier League team to get beaten by low league opposition at the weekend. So let us know in the comments. It's a really good debate. Dan, let's talk about Liverpool. You mentioned it there a couple of answers ago. Toughest home game of the season coming up on Saturday. How are you feeling?
I just really, really hope we don't concede from our own corner. That is my only real wish from this week, because I feel like we do this every time against Liverpool. And, perhaps we'll get to see the sight of Rico Henry as the last man back, scurrying back, so he's first to the ball, which will give me a bit of reassurance, I think. But I do think we need to rethink, maybe keep another man back for corners against Liverpool, because we've been hurt by that in the past. I think we need to learn from that first and foremost. Otherwise, I think it's a bit of a free hit. I think we should probably play a back five for this one. I think they're a serious team in pretty serious form. I know they've drawn a couple of games recently, but they're probably the best we're going to face at the moment. So I think if we try to, I would say, I think if we try to go toe to toe with them in the same way as City, I think it could get a little bit ugly, and I think we could see 3 or 4. So I think we will need to adapt our game a little bit. We will need to defend really, really well, and maybe we need to try and get some kind of outball in the team. That might mean bringing Sharda in. I don't really know how that looks, but I would worry about us being penned in if we don't have that kind of option to go a bit longer against them.
Yeah, I think like a 3-4-3, with KLP and Brian as wing backs, and then potentially like Sharda and Wissa kind of in the team somehow for that kind of outball. But I did watch them. I watched them last night, and they struggled for large periods against Forest. And I think, if Thomas Frank, I'm sure they're going to watch that in their analysis or in their prep for the game. But there was a bit of a blueprint there in terms of how Forest play and how they've got, I think they're bottom of the possession table this season, their average possession across the games. Sort of what they did to us is what they did to Liverpool for a long time in that game, in terms of just being camped on the edge of their box and soaking up that pressure and then being effective on the counter, which is maybe a case for Kevin Sharda to come in. I'm looking at their midfield in terms of McAllister, Szoboszlai and Gravenberch. Those are the 3 that started last night, and that's a very strong midfield. But the prospect of Kevin Sharda running at Andy Robertson that kind of looks like he's getting towards the end of his kind of best left back in the league era. I would say this season he's been quite bit off the pace. And then obviously Trent defensively is the kind of perennial argument in terms of Liverpool's defence. So same lineup, or does Schade come in terms of a 3-4-3 or a 5 at the back?
I think it'll have to be a 5 at the back. Obviously, we have to think about the third centre back. That will either be Ben Mee, who's just come back again, or maybe Roslev in that kind of wide centre back role. I've got to agree. I think you've got to put Brian at wing back if you're going to get Schade in the team, because you're not going to drop Wissa or Mbeumo, I don't think. But I do just think you'd need an outball. And again, Thiago, we keep saying this, he would be brilliant for this type of game, but he's not ever available, which is really frustrating given that we signed him almost a year ago now. I think we confirmed it in like February, didn't we? It's just such a shame that he's been available for 2 or 3 games this season. I certainly hope that that's not a sign of the future with him, but he would have been, again, absolutely brilliant for this one in terms of what we want, in terms of that outball and that way of playing. So I think, yes, Kevin Schade is a solution, I guess. Who comes out of the team? You'll have to sacrifice a midfielder, I would have thought. Probably Jensen. I would say Jensen on the bench, or it's between Jensen and Janelt, isn't it? It depends whether you want that extra bit of solidity that I think Janelt would offer, but then Jensen would be better at maybe playing that out ball. And
the out ball, But he did the similar one to the one that he got against Southampton when we were camped on the edge of the box, and he kind of just pings it on to Schade's head, and then Wissa has that big chance.
So maybe you're talking me into Jensen to stay in the side, to come out of the side. But I don't know. I just worry defensively. But I mean, if you've got 3 centre backs, maybe you can just have Norgaard with Jensen in there.
Perfect. Dan, I think that'll be a good point to round off today's podcast. The Ealing Road podcast will be back after Liverpool for a full-time show. And if you haven't already watched the Southampton review on my channel, the link for that video will be in the description. Remember to drop a comment down below with your thoughts ahead of the Liverpool game, on the Man City game. Do you think we could have won it? Was it a sign that maybe we're getting back on track at home? I think the Liverpool game is going to be an indication as to whether that's true or not. How you're feeling ahead of the Liverpool game, let us know in the comments section down below. Subscribe to the YouTube and Spotify channels, and also give us a follow on the socials at the Ealing Road on Twitter, at Ealing Road Pod on Instagram. Dan, it's been a pleasure as always.
Up the bees.